Welcome. I'm excited to be here with you today. We are going to talk about our solutions for the unstructured data storage. It's a great day for us. We worked on this solution for a long time, and finally we can bring this to you. My name is Gregory Turetsky. I'll be glad to present for you today. Please ask your questions. We'll be glad to take them at the end. If we won't have time to address all the questions, we'll be glad to reach out to you later on and provide answers. You have heard today and before about the global data explosion. The amount of data that has been generated is growing every year. IDC expects 175 zettabytes of data to be created by 2025 with this explosive growth, as you can see on this graph. However, we also see that the vast majority of this data is actually not stored. It gets deleted, right? And IDC predicts that only 17 zettabytes out of those 175 will be stored. Vast majority of the data will not. Why is it so? It is partially, at least, because of the costs of processing and storing the data. And many companies decide to optimize their spending and store only a subset of the data. We believe this is something that can be improved, and we want to allow customers to store much more data. So what we are announcing today to give the solution. There are a few things. First of all, there is what we call Cortex. Cortex is the S3 compatible object storage platform. We are making it available today for everyone on GitHub. It is available under Apache 2 and AVGL v3 licenses under Seagate Cortex on GitHub. We also provide, in addition to the source code that might be more complicated for some people to go and build, we offer an easier way to get some experience with Cortex through the virtual machine. There is a virtual machine image that can be downloaded from the same GitHub location for testing and quick start. We'll be glad to see everyone joining the Cortex community and contributing to this great project. In addition to Cortex, we are announcing today a Live Drive Rack. Live Drive Rack is a hardware and software reference architecture. It is a set of hardware that we certify at Seagate, but it's an off-the-shelf components, working with the leading vendors for servers and networking and so on, to ensure the best experience using Cortex at the enterprise. It is obviously powered by 100% open source Cortex, exactly the same code that you can find on GitHub. We package it and install on this certified hardware. We are working with selected partners to make it available to you, so you can purchase it through our partners. And then we provide full support by Seagate to the solution. So in case of any issue, once the solution is installed, a customer may call 1-800-Seagate and get support for all the components. So we are pre-announcing it today. The general availability for the first version of Live Drive Rack is expected in towards the end of this year. And then we have a long roadmap for other solutions beyond that, and I'll talk about this on the following slides. So what is Cortex and how did we start with that? Seagate is working for many years with different research organizations, especially in the European Union. And some of those projects are listed here on the slide with Sage, Sage2, Maestro, and others. And with all those projects, Seagate is involved in building an exabyte scale reliable storage solution. We have years of experience doing that from the HPC environments with our past products in the space. And we build on this experience and this skills now coming with Cortex. So we made Cortex to store exabytes of capacity. We added support for scale-out metadata, so customers may store tremendous amount of tags and metadata within together with the data. It is a very scalable solution with peer-to-peer architecture. Can be used for with multiple servers very large capacity, different CPU architectures, and so on. It is built as together with many collaborators, and now we also put in this all source code. It's a completely open source, available to everyone who wants to contribute. So why new object storage platform? There are several object storage solutions today in the market, and what you can see here on this slide is a research made by GigaOM, where they compare different existing object storage solutions based on specific evaluation metrics. You may find this comparison online. It's available on the GigaOM website. It's available in other sources. And it's less interesting about what solutions are out there. What I wanted to talk about is what we expect the same research to say about Seagate solution with LiveDrive Rack next year, when basically we present this solution to GigaOM researchers. So those are the 6 evaluation metrics that GigaOM believes are critical for customers for object storage. One that is probably the most important these days for on-premises object storage is the cost per gigabyte. Again, when we talk about petabytes and exabytes of capacity, this becomes really critical for corporations of any size. We believe that at Seagate we can provide vertical integration starting from the hard drives to enclosures and then all the way to the software that can be ready to any future high capacity hard drive that we're going to provide. So we believe that we support today with LiveDrive Rack, we support 16 terabyte and 18 terabyte drives. As soon as the 20 terabyte HAMR drive becomes available, it will be supported by LiveDrive Rack. So we will always provide support for the largest capacity drives, driving the cost per terabyte down. Speaking of efficiency, we provide, again, very dense solutions. We're talking about multiple petabytes per single rack, and high density storage enclosures, low floor space required, again, because of the density, less components that may fail, and so on. It is a very flexible solution. It's not a solution for a small mom and pop shops, right? We start from roughly a petabyte and then can grow to multiple petabytes and exabytes of capacity in a single namespace. But if a customer is not a very small entry-level solution, requires a small entry-level solution, we can provide a lot of flexibility growing from relatively small scale all the way to exabytes. We are offering a very manageable solution. We build the management stack starting from the API. So everything that you can do with the system can be done using REST API to configure this solution, manage users, manage access controls, and so on. On top of that, we build GUI and CLI that can be used by customers. In addition to that, the architecture that we have behind Cortex is very extendable. We can have a separate discussion about this, and I think there is a deep dive session on Cortex in particular that covers it. We provide an ability to develop custom plugins that can run within a motor, within the engine behind the Cortex, and provide extra functionality. The entire source code is openly available on GitHub, so customers and partners may add functionality and then may contribute back to LiveDrive Rack program. We are working on the ecosystem as we speak, and there will be more announcements coming, so stay tuned on that. And on the TCO side, we definitely plan to provide different ways to use and get a LiveDrive Rack that can meet multiple requirements with both CapEx and, in the future, OpEx models as well. What are the key use cases for LiveDrive Rack? We believe that any application and use case that requires object storage can benefit from the LiveDrive Rack solution. We see a lot of demand from backup and restore customers. They probably are the largest segment today for the on-prem large capacity object storage. So we're definitely working with some partners in the space. We see interest from customers who are doing big data analytics, We look into the IoT and sensors and machine-generated data, into solutions like Splunk, Smart Store, and others in this space. We're talking to folks from the genomics industry about this highly scalable, low-cost, affordable storage solution. Video surveillance is a big area for us, and we have multiple engagements in this space. Media and entertainment, especially as an active archive solution. All those areas are very interested. Customers from those verticals are very interested in a solution that would provide affordable, high-capacity object storage. So what is LiveDrive Rack? As I mentioned, we are going to announce the first version of LiveDrive Rack by end of this year. That's what we call the LiveDrive Rack R1. And the reference architecture for this solution is basically a single enclosure. We're going to have the Seagate 5U84 with two controller nodes. So those two controller nodes, they have 50 gigabit per second interconnect for internal data traffic, things like high availability, heartbeat, some data transfer within the cluster, and so on. Each one of those controller nodes can access to, all the drives within the enclosure. And we provide 50 gigabit a second connectivity to customers' network for the S3 access. There is also a separate network provided for the management access that can be used to provision users, manage, configure the system, and so on. So it's an S3 compatible solution. We rely on the Seagate Adapt technology for data protection within the enclosure here, and it's an active solution. It is a solution that may fit some of the use cases. We realize that many customers who are working with object storage need much higher scalability. So this is why we are planning to bring the future solution that I'll talk about this later on. But let's talk more about the R1 first. So this is the snapshot from the GUI for LiveDrive Rack 1. You can see throughput graph. Customers may build multiple graphs on the same page, right, with different scale. We have here a workload that gets to about 3 gigabytes a second throughput, and this is a single enclosure, right? This is a system in our lab, so you don't see much utilization. But one thing that is interesting here is this is a one enclosure, 4U enclosure with 106 drives. This is a usable capacity of this enclosure. So those drives are not yet generally available, but as soon as they become generally available, we will be able to offer much more capacity per one unit of the rack space than most of the other solutions, if not all of them. This is an S3 compatible solution, so any S3 compliant client implementation can access the data. So I'm using here some examples with S3 CMD to manage buckets or list all the buckets. That works. I can also run an S3 benchmark, for example, to generate some workload and get to the numbers that I'm showing here, or 3 gigabytes a second with read, 2.3 gigabytes a second with write, and so on. And again, depending on your workload, you may see different throughput and different performance. Again, this is the first generation. We expect the performance to grow and to improve and scale once we release future versions. I also mentioned that we provide an API for the management that can be used by customers behind the scenes, behind the, in addition to the GUI and the CLI. And here are some snippets from the Postman using the API for Cortex and LiveDrive Rack. So we provide, for example, obviously a way to query the system to get list of alerts. Right, and we use this API also for the GUI and CLI and everything else. But we provide some additional functionality that can be very useful, for example, for audit purposes. So imagine a storage administrator who is analyzing what's going on with the system. They see that there were some alerts generated. They understand what the reason for those alerts. they can use the API to actually inject comments into the logs, and those comments are stored in the log for as long as the data in the log is preserved. So it can be used, for example, to analyze in the future different events that happened with the system. We find this very useful for audit purposes, for example. And the API can be used to list or create users and accounts and so on. So this is all what we are bringing in with R1. We definitely understand the need for the higher scale, more capacity, more performance, and so on. So one thing that we are confident is that a solution that can scale to exabytes of capacity needs special attention to performance and to data protection. Traditional solutions that provide object storage today, they rely on a single level erasure coding. With single level erasure, depending on what the configuration that different solutions support, there is some amount of drives that within the stripe that are used for data, other drives are used for parity, and then the system may lose some amount of drives, and the remaining drives can be used to rebuild the data. It all works great in relatively small scale systems. When we talk about the large scale systems, this rebuild may take longer time, especially with the large hard drives. And during this rebuild time, the system might be in less protected space, more exposed to further failures and data loss. And the rebuild itself may impact performance of the system, may generate excessive traffic going over the internal network within the cluster. This is something that may not work well for multiple petabytes or exabytes. So what we are doing with the Cortex going beyond the R1 is introducing the hierarchical erasure coding solution. With the hierarchical erasure coding, we rely on basically two levels of data protection. The first level of protection is within the enclosure. So similar to what we do in R1, we rely on Seagate Adapt technology to protect the data within the enclosure. And in case of a drive failure, the rebuild happens within the enclosure. There is no excessive data traffic between the nodes. There is no performance degradation. And the rebuild itself is very fast because of the Adapt technology. In the very unlikely case of a bigger outage that may impact the entire enclosure, we can rely on the second level of erasure coding that we build within the Cortex software itself, that can basically provide additional data protection across multiple nodes, across multiple enclosures. So this way we can ensure that with simple drive failures, we can rebuild quickly without performance degradation, without any overhead on the system. This is the architecture for LiveDrive R2. This is what we are preparing for the for release next year. In this configuration, we're going to have multiple nodes. Every node is a single controller head and a single enclosure. All those controller heads are interconnected through the internal network. We are building 100 gigabit internal network for data protection and high availability. We are going to provide a 100 gigabit data network to the customers with S3 protocol, and again 1 gigabit network for the management. We expect the solution to scale from 3 nodes to 6, 9, 12, and so on. And again, this is something that we plan to make available next year. So you may ask, where can I get this? With Cortex, it's available starting from today on GitHub. This is the URL. We'll be glad to see you and everyone joining the community and using it. The virtual machine for functionality preview, but not for production use, is also available today. As for LiveDrive Rack R1, it is going to be generally available towards the end of this year through our partners. So talk to your Seagate contacts and they'll be able to help you to reach out to them. Thank you. Are there any questions? Oh, here they are. So you say that the software for LiveDrive is 100% open source. Is it really true? There must be some software that is closed. Well, LiveDrive has the same software that we have on GitHub. There is nothing special beyond that we didn't include. Some other companies may claim to have an open source solution, but they also have some extra functionality that can be available only through with license. With LiveDrive, we are offering 100% open source, so everything that you can see in LiveDrive is available with open source. In fact, maybe some advanced functionality might be first available with Cortex, and then once we've fully tested and validate with our hardware, we'll make it available also with LiveDrive. So if you want an enterprise support, enterprise solution, go with LiveDrive. If you want to see kind of the leading edge technologies and leading edge functionality, which may not be fully tested yet for production use, and you want to contribute more to the development, you can go and use open source Cortex on GitHub. Okay, any other question? What mechanisms are running in LiveDrive that are specific to large capacity drive? So we are adding different features within the LiveDrive solutions that can support large capacity drives. I mentioned some of those, for example, with the hierarchical data protection and the reliance on adapt technology for rebuild. There are other solutions that we can talk about after the conference. Is it possible to connect multiple enclosures to LDR R1? Okay, so LDR stands for LiveDrive Rack. By the way, that's also something that we use internally as a shortening of the name. So today the LiveDrive Rack solution is a single enclosure with 2 servers. We understand the demand for a scale-out solution, and we are working on making it available. We plan the scale-out support with LiveDrive Rack R2 next year. We may provide a scale-up solution in the future with R1-like architecture, where somebody might be able to add just more enclosures to the same couple of servers, but this is not the current plan of record. Currently, we are planning to provide, for those who need larger capacity, to offer the scale-out solution with R2. Another question here, will Seagate support software-only version of LiveDrive Rack? So this is something that we are considering. For now, we have no plans to do so. We believe that the best way to offer the enterprise support for customers, especially at the large scale, is relying on fully tested hardware. And we do not make servers or network, right? We use off-the-shelf components, obviously, but we run tests internally, and we prescript what are those pre-tested configurations that others may use to build LiveDrive Rack solutions. With the software only, we offer today access to Cortex. Everyone can build it and use it, but it's not something that we provide commercial support for. This may change in the future. We are monitoring the demand. We may make some decisions in the future, but for now, the plan is to provide community support for Cortex and the enterprise support through Seagate for LiveDrive Rack. Okay, other questions? Any connectivity to public cloud? I assume if you're asking if Cortex is available in the public cloud. So we are definitely working on the solutions there with the especially with LiveDrive Rack. We understand that customers who deploy the system on premises at the large scale, they will always want to provide the connectivity also to the public cloud. There are different solutions that we are working on, and we're going to announce them in the future. So please stay tuned, and we'll be glad to share more information about the ways to transfer data, for example, between LiveDrive Rack and public cloud, or between different LiveDrive Rack instances on premises. Stay tuned for future announcements. when Live Drive Rack will be available for order. So again, as I mentioned, that Cortex is available starting from today. Live Drive Rack R1 should be available towards the end of this year through our selected partners. Reach out to your contacts at Seagate, and they'll help you to find those partners. Yeah, I think I'm running out of time. There are more questions. We'll make sure that we reach out to everyone who asked those questions after the conference and provide all the answers. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for listening. We'll be glad to have everyone joining Cortex community and providing feedback on this new solution. Thank you.